Right. Good morning to all of you. I hope you can see the presentation as well as I'm audible. Let me welcome all of you. I prefer to have an understanding about about the audience. Like since we don't have much audience here, so it will be a private discussion. If you can just brief me about yourself. I think like Mike is already muted or Krishan, can we open the mics for a time being? So, so then I can get a feedback about the background and all like before I go into the program.
Okay, everyone can speak now.
All right. Okay. So if you can just brief me about yourself, in terms of environment part, where are you like what you do kind of a thing so then that will be very easy for me to uh, take a discussion on the presentation part.
Let me start. Hi, Rasika. I'm Tilina.
Hi.
So I'm representing Atlas Celia and currently working as head of QA in the environmental and OSHA management.
Right, excellent. So we know each other, right?
Yes.
Right, okay. Let's see from others. So what about others? Maybe they don't want to introduce themselves, or what is the situation? Is there, we can, is there anyone who would like to then for me, it's very easy. Gihani, Madhushani, you want to just introduce yourself? Priyankara, Nuan? All right, okay. So I think I'm not, so I think I believe like Tilina, all of you are coming from a kind of a background with the sustainability or environment. Or so I'll just pitch my presentation according to that. So the this program basically we try to discuss within maybe 1.5 hours time insight into the sustainable leadership best practices for environmental management system, because right now there's a huge requirement and huge demand, and sometimes business uh, business also basically driven by this particular requirement. So this is very key requirement right now. So let's move into the presentation. So this is about me. Like I work as a project director and a CSO for RR Associates, very much specialize in the environment management system. So and then I'm heavily involved with ISO 14,000, ISO 50,000, like FSC. So all environment related projects. And then carbon footprint, GHG calculation projects, we heavily involved. So like my entire career with 20 years with Halcyon, I'll involved with those activities. So in this today's program, I'll try to cover basically these areas. So understanding the sustainability and leadership part, and then introduction to environment management system, and then we'll discuss a little bit of not the theory part, a little bit of when you started to implement the environmental management system, what are the repercussions, why you need to implement those kind of requirement. Then align business strategies with global environmental standard. So there are serious global requirement, and then best practices in sustainable leadership. So earlier we talk about strategic leadership, but now we started to talk about the sustainable leadership, and then integrating sustainability into core business operations. So earlier it was sustainability is a different part, and then you have a separate business strategies, but now it's a common task. And then we always talk about risk management, but now there's a question: what is risk management in environment? So risk management and resilience in environment management part, and then monitoring, reporting, and transparency part is there. And then we discussed a little bit of case studies with our experience. Maybe we are not going through the customer names and all, but we can discuss a little bit of the benefit what the organization got. Like so, then you have some idea about it, and then the case study part. And then what are the challenges when you go for the sustainability part? So we're going to discuss, and then like how to set up a practical approach for this. So like with this short time period, I'll try to cover these areas, right? So before I get into the technical part, this will basically give you a very clear indication. Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need. That is so true, but not every man's greed. So this is said by Mahatma Gandhi. So this is very true. So I believe this is the core quote for sustainability part. Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. So if we can do this, I believe this is part of the sustainability, right? So let's move on. And then first part, understanding the sustainability and leadership. What is sustainability leadership? The role of leadership in driving environmental initiatives, how sustainability can benefit business growth and reputation. So now earlier, like when we start our career, environmental management system is a kind of not part of the strategy. Like environmental management system, you discuss mainly about your waste management, how you manage your waste, it goes into that level. Maybe energy is part of the engineering team's job. Like top management never discuss those energy part. And then like all of a sudden now, last 5-10 years, it started to change. So we started to talk about global warming, and then global warming contribution by the industries. All these factors came up. So then the main part, the strategic development part, then it automatically linked with the sustainability part. Even any ISO standard now, 9022, maybe 1445 standard. When you discuss the context analysis, you started to discuss about the climate change factors, because that's part of business. Because the temperature ups and downs, the flooding, fuel issues, all these things started to discuss. So sustainability leadership mean when you develop the organization strategies, you have to consider sustainability factors, because sometimes some customers are basically pushing you for this requirement, right? Like some customers are basically pushing you. Customers are saying, okay, look, how sustainable your organization, because like say they assess your organization before they come to a kind of a conclusion, right? They assess your organization. If you are not sustainable, maybe your product can be kind of cheap, but people doesn't want to work with you. Like say, even in garment industry, we are having a situation, because sometimes some customers, they will ask what type of chemical you are using. Are they environmental friendly, or is not environmental friendly chemicals? So if the moment you said, okay, we are using this particular chemical, so we have no idea about the chemicals what we use, even your costs can be very low, but organization doesn't want to work with you. So it's not easy. If you want to replace a chemical in the product, because you have to maintain the quality, all the parameters. So it's a long process. So the leadership should take initial initiatives, all these things. So leaderships know what are sustainable requirement, and then of course you can drive your business. Even industries, service industries, you might think, okay, service industries doesn't need to consider about this sustainability part. Of course we have to. Why? Because sometimes organization basically started to talk about your organization carbon footprint. Now if you can see some top companies, even in Sri Lanka, even in world, they started to provide your this sustainability data. Maybe their total organizational carbon footprint. How do they mitigate? So of course these things really matter. So then top management should understand this part. And then now there are green accounting systems are there. So now even now accountants are also like part of this sustainability. So this is a big area. And there are so much of standards, so much of guidelines are available. right? So these are very, very, very important areas for the top management. Now, now introduction to environmental management system EMS. So what is environmental management system? Why it is important? So overview of 14,000 and its role as a global standard, key component of the an effective environmental management system. So this is very important. So ISO 14,000 is a base standard, right? So what do you mean by base standard? I mean, like, this standard talk about everything, not only your energy, not only your waste. So organization can identify your main key areas. ISO 14,000 2015 standard has like two critical factors. One is covering the legal requirement. So in Sri Lanka, I believe like we have everybody from Sri Lanka, right? So in Sri Lanka, we have EPL. We call it Environmental Protection License. So first thing we have to make sure we are covering all the EPL requirements, Environmental Protection License requirement. And then there are like Central Environmental Authority. They have given a guideline or maybe legal requirement. Say if it is a stack emission, right? If you are using a boiler, then you have to monitor the stack emission. So there will be like emission levels. Your sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide levels are there. So there's a legal requirement, maybe boundary sound level. So you need to study all these requirements, right? So then this is what like environmental management system. So that's the first part. So doing this, you make sure your organization adhere to all the legal requirement. So again, going back to the leadership, see, when you do this legal study, if you identify there's a gap, right? There's a gap. So then leadership can take action. Like, say for example, you are discarding the water, right? Like in your organization, you are using water, so there will be a wastewater, you are discarding it. But you are not violating the legal limit, like say it within the legal limit, your COD or BOD levels are within, but top management can see the trend. That's very important. It was upward trend, right? Like, you have a effluent treatment plant, ETP is kind of old. So you can see the upward trend. So still not crossing the legal limit, below the legal limit. So you can see it's upward trend. So maybe within another 1 or 2 years time, it might go over the legal limit if you continue like this. Or maybe you are enhancing the production capacity, but without considering your ETP capacity. There are plenty of cases like that. So then top management need to consider, because you are going towards a legal violation. Right. What happens if there's a legal violation? There will be a serious repercussion. In later slides, we are going to discuss that part as well. Right. So this is very important part. So that's why, like strategically, okay, maybe other 1 or 2 years time, because it's huge investment. Right. So introduction or maybe expanding the capacity of the ETP is a lot of investment. So management need to take that proper decision. So first part, like when you go for environmental management system, EMS, ISO 14,000, you consider your legal requirement. And then you make sure you cover all the legal requirement. And then you take action. Then you start to monitor. Right? See, if you don't monitor your legal requirement, what will happen? Like, you don't know the upward or downward trends. So the monitoring data will go to the management team. So this is very important part. So this is one area I need to discuss. So this is the first part of the ISO 14,000. You cover your legal requirement. And then the second part, there's a study we need to do. We call it aspect impact evaluation. What do you mean by aspect impact evaluation? Uh, Based on your purpose of the organization, based on the activity, there will be an impact and the aspect of the organization, your activity, and then the outcome of your activity. So most of the time, outcome would be like, a negative. Say, for example, environmental protection license talk about your waste discard. How do you do that? Is it a scheduled waste or normal waste? So there will be a legal guideline for that. But usage of energy, in Sri Lanka, we don't have any legal guideline. Any legal requirements are not there in Sri Lanka, right? So, but when you do the aspect impact evaluation, we identify what are the areas we are using this significant energy use machine. Like in what particular department we are basically using this particular high energy requirement. So then you can control. So I'm like, any organization within the Sri Lanka, you have to adhere, whether you go for ISO 14,000 or not, you have to adhere for all the legal requirement. That's a must. Right? That's actually a must. But when you go for environmental management system, additional requirement is you do this aspect impact evaluation, then you identify the significant environmental impact areas. There's a methodology we use, areas. Then you try to control it, like you call it continuous improvement. So that is very important part in 14,000. So there are two factors. One is you basically cover all the legal requirements, start monitoring it, and then you go beyond that, right? You go beyond that and then study all the environmental impact, and then try to control all the impact, environmental impact, whatever the facilities you have. And then, of course, you are like, providing good solution for the environment. Like, you're cutting down carbon footprint, you're cutting down energy, you're cutting down like waste. So these are part of it. And then you try to bring the people also. So this is the environmental management system in nutshell. Like, if somebody asks what is environmental management system, you talk about your legal requirement, you study, then you started to monitor it. That's one thing. Second thing, conduct the aspect impact evaluation and then identify the significant aspect, and then you started to control those significant aspects as per the decision based by your organization. So legal, you have no decision at all. And then there's another one additional requirement, emergency preparedness. So what do you mean by emergency preparedness? Mean like if something goes wrong, I'm like anything can goes wrong, right? Due to natural disaster or maybe man-made disaster, whatever can go wrong. Like say for example, if there's a oil spillage, you have all the controls, you have bunting, all these things are there. But what happens if there's oil spillage? Then how you control that? If there's a chemical spillage, how to control that? Whether your team is capable of doing that. So environmental management system basically talk about all these three activities. Like, there are other plenty, like, there are 10 elements in the standard. But if somebody asks in nutshell, what do you mean by environmental management system? So here we talk about the introduction. So these three areas are very critical. So, like this is the three critical areas which you need to cover, right? And then you talk about number three, align business strategies with global environmental standard. This is very important part. So ISO 14000 2015 is a global environmental standard. So the moment you got this standard, so there's a credential. Like, in Sri Lanka, like if you check ISO 9000, there will be so many people who with the ISO 9000 certification, but very few organizations they are with ISO 14000 standard because it's not actually easy. It's not easy, right? Like you have to do a lot of work, right? So it's not management. Like physically, you have to do a lot of work. So in this standard, like aligning business strategies with global environment standard, mean like how global environment standard can shape the business strategy, importance of aligning the with the framework like UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now we started to talk about UN Sustainable Development Goal. I'll take one example with ISO 50001 and leveraging ISO 14001 to meet international requirement. So these are like, globally environmental standard. People started to talk about global requirement because like, Sri Lanka is a export oriented country, right? Like, we try to export our product into other countries. So especially when you started to export to the other countries, they start all these questions. And especially our big markets are like, Europe, USA. That's where we want to send our product. So then, like especially Europe, they are very concerned about the environment, right? So they ask like, even when you send a product, one particular product, they ask what is the carbon footprint, right? So like, whether is it offset, like, all requirements they started to question, and maybe sometimes they start to question about your organization as well. So like I'll take one example, like, UN Sustainable Development Goals. Like most of the organization now started to discuss, started to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. So if I take one example from ISO 50000 2018, that is energy standard. So if you follow the energy standard, there are like three elements from US Sustainable Development Goal, like, clean energy, all like, those aspects already covered, right? Reasonable usage of energy, all these things are basically covered, right? So this is very important part. So even like, people develop global strategies, but when you go for 14,000, 50,000, all these ISO standard, of course, you have a like kind of a leverage. So you can cover some of the areas, right? Then now I need to share some best practices in sustainable leadership for EMS. So we are going to discuss leading by example, setting a vision for environmental stewardship. and engaging stakeholder holders, employee, customers, and community, and creating culture for accountability and continuous improvement. So this is one key area we are going to discuss. If I take one example, uh, some like there are some organization, right, with the ISO 14,000, they're basically getting a lot of benefit from ISO 14,000. See, we work with all ISO standard, like, quality, environment, food safety, occupation health and safety standard we work. But when you try to work with the other standard, right, like, quality or occupation health and safety, especially food safety standard, we had to put lot of, restriction or a lot of new practices for the employees. Sometimes, like, we had to put forcefully, like, if people with a beard under food safety, we might say, oh, you had to remove the beard or you had to have a beard guard, right? Maybe we'll ask them to have a head caps. So there will be a lot of requirement is coming from the standard, and then a lot of guideline, a lot of monitoring are there. But see, the ISO 14,000 standard, of course, there will be a guideline, there will be a monitoring mechanism, but very easily you can get employees. Say one particular organization which we work with ISO 14,000, they got, like, big benefit because there was a gap getting like employee engagement with the processes. But with the ISO 14,000, what they did was, like, they organized some, like, some competitions, drawing competition, like, those kind of things. So they ask even their, like, families to involve with this kind of activity, especially their kids. And then tree planting programs, and then, like, beach cleaning programs, providing trees for the forest. So those kind of program, they, like, they involve their employees. So people like that because, like, most of the time the issue with us is, like, we don't we try to, like, differentiate ourselves with the environment. But with these activities, of course, you try to, like, try to bridge that gap. You are part of environment, right? Like, when you plant a tree in the organization, and then that tree started to grow up, and then that will give you a kind of a pride, right? And then, of course, you started to calculate the carbon offset from that particular tree. Say, for example, it's from tree planted by me, Rasita. So then it started to grow. Like, so I can calculate the carbon offset. And then, of course, other way around, the amount of oxygen released by that particular tree. And then there will be additional benefit. If it is a fruit tree, that then people started to get that benefit as well. So these are, like, kind of a, engagement of employee. This is like this standard ISO 14,000 is very easy to get people involvement in the organization. There's one thing. And then the customer and the community. Say, for example, the road cleaning, beach cleaning, or maybe forest patch cleaning, depend on the industry where you are, or maybe nearby river cleaning. And then I saw there are some organization, they work with putting a traps, collect all the, like, polythene, plastic, preventing goes to the sea, right? Look, so there are organizations, they work together, right? So you can develop some corporates, work on this kind of a project, and then prevent all the plastics goes to the sea. So these are nice projects. So we can work with the community. And then, of course, customers, sometimes they want the story. Like, one particular project, what we did was, like, when you do the carbon footprint calculation, it's like you say number of trees, this is the growth curve, and this is the amount of carbon saving. Okay, that's fine. Like, you are getting the agreed benefit out of it. But there are one other project. What they did was, like, they developed the trees with the help of community, and then they connect two forest patches. Yeah, so then they call it corridors. So then, like, that's a nice story. And then again with the community, if they protect the tree when the growth curves is going high, and then the organization getting benefit out of financial benefit, and then they're willing to share some financial benefit with the community as well. So that's very nice project, right? Then you can do a, like, biodiversity study before and after, right? And then you can basically like, maybe water, you can go up to water quality level because you are introducing more trees in that particular area. So you can do a lot of activities which you can monitor. So then these are, like, creating a culture. And then, like, people started to take accountability. Like, when you go to the organization, if you want to check sustainability practices, like waste is the key. If the organization actually practicing the waste, the sustainability practices is best thing to check their waste disposal. So the moment you open the dustbin, right? If you say, okay, that is for food, that is for plastic, kind of a thing. So when you see plastic in the food dustbin, like people are not accountable, like somebody is pushing them. So I believe like Tilinam, like most of you are coming from industry. So if you can convert their people's mindset to take the accountability into that level, that's where the strategic vision should be in the top management, right? So this is one particular key area. And then integrating sustainability into core business operation. This is very important. Identify environmental aspect and impact in business process, developing strategies for sustainable resource management, water, energy waste, and then implementing green procurement and supply chain practices. So this is one particular area which we are going to discuss. So environment aspect and then business strategies. This is very important. See, like I mentioned at the beginning, uh, you know, uh, some organization, they identify their key sustainability strategies and then link to the business. Like say, for example, now my example, the chemical, a type of chemical. Customer might say, okay, we don't need this particular chemicals in our product. So you can't easily take away these chemicals at the beginning. So it should be part of the sustainability. And then environment, sometimes some organizations said, okay, I need to cut down my greenhouse gas emission percentage by 30%, or may sometimes like by 2030. So there are some targets given by the customers, right? So it's not easy. So if some organizations say, okay, your total greenhouse has to be cut down by 30%. So then what are you going to do? Because you have to maintain your production capacity, and then like per ton, this is the amount of carbon footprint, GHG emissions goes. So how are you going to reduce this? Maybe you need to improve your machine capabilities, or maybe you need to cut down your energy cost, right? So then that should be part of the business process, because if you need to bring new machineries, it's a huge investment. You can't just bring machine just to cut down the carbon footprint, because then your business has to be closed down, because like you're not looking at your benefits and the profits, right? So you need to bring the machinery as per all these guidelines, right? So this is one key area. So environmental aspect and impact of the business process. So this is very important. Top management now, they need to consider all these aspects, right? And then your strategies, water. Sri Lanka now, water usage, there will be a limitation. Now, there are pressure coming from customers to say, cut down your good quality, drinking quality water usage for your industry by 50%. Imagine if this comes to a dye house. I don't know if someone from the garment industries are available in the program, but if somebody said, okay, cut down your dye house water usage by 50%, because like anyway dye house water, you using the purified water, and then you are discarding the wastewater. So that wastewater, sometimes it has some residues, the colors, the pH has changed, sometimes it's temperature is high. So you're basically discarding this water. So your customer might say, okay, cut down by 50%. So how are we going to do that? So of course, with the existing machineries, you can't do it. So you have to go for a new machinery. So then that's an investment, right? So then you have to consider all these factors. And then what do you mean by green procurement? So well, recently we worked with one particular project. So when we do the carbon footprint analysis, GHG analysis, we the biggest portion is a manufacturing organization, an export-oriented organization. So the biggest portion of the carbon footprint came from where? You might say it's from manufacturing. Actually, it's not. It's actually from the shipping. So initially people thought it's our calculation error. but actually it's not a calculation, it's the actual scenario. So this revealed two things. One is like, when you do the calculation, you can identify the hidden areas. Like, everybody thinks, okay, my major carbon footprint is uh, coming from, uh, coming from like manufacturing facility, right? But when you do the actual calculation, you realize actually it's not coming from your manufacturing facility, it's coming from shipping, which is out of your control. That's what you think. But then organizations are pushing you, okay, you need to cut down your carbon footprint. So then you have to, like, talk to your ship line and say, okay, how green your supply chain. So now there are green supply chain concepts are coming up, and then ship lines are especially talking about this. And then even in Sri Lanka, right, even in Sri Lanka, there are transport organization. They talk about GHG emission zero, or maybe they calculate the 1 kilometer. This is the amount of carbon footprint you are using. So there are organizations go into that particular level. So this is a very interesting area. So this is a very fast developing area, and then of course we have no option. We have to adapt to this. This is one particular area. Right. Let's move on. So risk management. Now you have a question. What do you mean by risk management? Like, under business risk management we talk about, and then maybe like environment, not the environment, like occupation health and safety. We started to talk about risk management. So here we talk about risk management and resilience in environmental management system. So identify and mitigating the environmental risk, building resilience against the climate change impact, integrating risk management into environmental management system for long-term sustainability. So what do you mean by identify the mitigating environmental risk? So there are so many environmental risks, like, which I discussed earlier. See, this particular organization, they might have, like, customer might say, okay, cut down your water footprint, cut down your carbon footprint. So those can be some risk factors. And same time, there can be a natural disaster, right? So those are risks coming from customer, right? And then maybe energy scarcity, like in countries like Sri Lanka. We might think of, like, we had that similar situation. So energy scarcity, right? And then now we go for biomass, because, like, it basically minimize your carbon footprint, and as well as it's a cost saving mechanism for organization. So but what about the supply of bio woods? Right, like, like, do we have a entire supply chain is assured? Right, so that's the question. Like, people who are using biomass, right now, is it the entire supply chain is assured? Because you can't use the forest, so there should be a sustainable forest to use for biomass, right? So is it assured? So those are the risk factors we are facing right now. Right, and then environmental impact, maybe flood situation, or maybe drought. So those are kind of environment. So we need to do, like, depend on the climate change impact. We need to actually study, like, have a kind of a action plan, because business should continue, and then same time adapting to these environmental changes. Right, like, if your factory situated in an area where you have a flood risk, what do you do? Right, if you have a factory which is situated in flood risk area, what do you do? First option is what? You look at whether I can relocate my factory. So that's the first option. But say that's the kind of risk mitigation, right? Like, you try to avoid the risk. But if there's no option, or maybe because there will be other benefit, if you are staying that particular location, then you try to identify the risk mitigation. So if then you can do a study. In one particular organization, we did a like, detailed study. You study, like, up to last 30 years, the flood situation, flood level. So getting this data is not easy, but we did that level, and then identify, like, forecast with the climate change. So there will be a lot of analysis, right? A lot of forecast activities. Sometimes you might need to use the softwares. So we did this study and identify, like, another 30 years, what would be the maximum level. And then you try to take some control based on that. So that top management strategically decide, okay, look, we are going to stay this particular factory in this particular location because there are benefits. So then there will be a risk from the flood situation. So you analyze 30 backwards, 30 upwards, and then you take control. So this is very important part. It goes back to the strategic, right? And then the risk management. So environment management system, like, when you identify my first example, you're like a very simple example, but it can create huge impact for the business. Say your base water level, COD or BOD level is going up, but below the legal limit. So you are safe, but you can see the trend. Yeah, you can of course see the trend. Like, a trend is actually upward. It goes upward, but it's below the level. But you can see after another 2 years time, it will cross the legal limit. So now you see this as a kind of a risk. So this is the kind of internal risk which you can do. But if you don't monitor the trend, if you don't analyze the trend, what will happen? This won't success, right? Because, like, if you have only one dot, so you can happily say, okay, my level is this, I'm here. But when you analyze, you can see the trend is going up, right? So this is a crucial factor. So this is the risk management, right? When you do environmental management system, and even in Sri Lanka, we have so much of cases because the nearby community, they go against the particular organization. There are areas. So sometimes some cases organization has to move out from that particular area, go to a different area, and then their brand name is a questionable then. So they have to change the entire name. And then, like, then there are some other example. The factory, there was an emergency situation, and then even the nearby community has to involve with that. And then I think like 2-3 people has to, like, sacrifice their life because of that situation. So these are kind of a risk factors. So when you do aspect impact evaluation, maybe safety risk analysis, you do, or you cover everything. So this is all the standard talk about risk management. And then this standard basically supposed to provide a lot of information for the top management uh, to take decisions, right? This is very important part. Right. Now, monitoring reporting. I think like I discussed this. I discussed a lot about the monitoring mechanism part, because pointless having a fantastic system, right? You can have a fantastic system, but if the system doesn't start to monitor. So monitoring, reporting, and transparency. So importance of measuring environmental performance, key metrics for tracking progress, maybe carbon footprint, waste reduction, reporting to stakeholders, transparency, and communication strategies. So this is very important part. Like, when you started to like, environmental monitoring, say for example carbon footprint, your energy level, your waste. So now, like, most of the organization, like, when they go for environmental management system, you can see when you go to the uh, the canteen, right? When you go to the canteen, like, you can see uh, they basically mention uh, uh, the total food waste, this amount, this kilogram. Say, for example, I'll take this example, like, communication, monitoring, reporting, and transparency. You can communicate like your food waste for last month, last particular day is about, we'll say, 40 kilograms or maybe 100 kilograms. Like, and then the food is not served by somebody, it's a buffet system. Like, you serve by yourself. So imagine you serve yourself, and then again there's 100 kilograms or 30 to 100 kilograms of waste. What will happen? So it's like, you can say, okay, it's collected, we are sending it to the piggery, it's reuse, right? That's fine. But what about the energy goes into that production? Like the food preparation, before that transportation, maybe farming up to that level. Like, a lot of energy goes into that. So there's no way you can recover it. Right. There's no way you can recover it. Right. So that's actually waste. So then that's why I said, like, we need to actually bring people into this kind of a scenario. So you bring the people, and then you ask people to, like, involve, like, your accountability part. People, like, See, accountability start from when you started to serve the food. That's where I start the accountability. If you can minimize your own waste, that's where you can start your process, right? You minimize your own waste. So that's the accountability. So that's the message we need to give. So when you start to monitor the data, like for example, waste or maybe energy. So you might say, okay, per ton, this is our energy involvement. So then maybe you develop a program to cut it down. Or maybe like if it is a hotel, you might say, okay, my gas consumption per guest is this. So, or maybe water usage per guest is this. So, how can we reduce this? So, these are very important parts. So, when you started to monitor and then you transparency start to communicate, and then this is why, some most of the organization in their annual report also, right? They started to communicate this information. They started to communicate and say, look, our carbon footprint this particular year is this, and then next year is this. These are my reduction plan. So we are very transparent. And then next year also, like, you are giving the same commitment. So if you have the same figure, or if there's an increase without having production increase or anything, right? So then that can be a kind of a question mark. So there will be a people start, but you start transparent, and then of course you take the challenge. I'm going to cut down by 10%. Maybe your customer might say, okay, you have to cut down by 30 to 40%. There are industries we are working on right now. There was a customer demand, like they'll say, okay, within 3 years, within 5 years, you have to cut down your water usage, your energy usage. All these things are given by the organization. So there will be a lot of external pressure coming from your customers, right? A lot of external pressure coming from your stakeholders, whether you like it or not, right? So best thing, better to get ready with that. Right now, element number 8. So case studies of successful sustainable leadership. So I had to basically highlight example of companies excellent in sustainable leadership in environment management system, like key takeaways and best practice from their journey. So I don't have authority to mention the names, but there are organization, like, what they do is, basically, when they implement the energy management system or environmental management system, they get a lot of benefit out of it. Like first benefit is actually, they are getting the energy. Energy is a key factor. So you try to get energy reduction. There are organization, 2 to 3% energy reduction, but you might think 2 to 3% is very low, right? Actually it's not. If you compare, with these industries, heavy industries, so they are using 2 to 3 is a huge amount, but there are industries, they are getting about 5 to 10%. So that's lot. And then they can forecast, they can plan out. So that's one key requirement is energy. And then and even like when you cut down your energy consumption, of course you can cut down your carbon footprint. It's a continuous improvement, performance improvement. Like all these standards started to talk about, if you compare your quality management system, that standard pretty much talk about the continuous improvement of your quality management system. But this energy standard or environmental standard is started to talk about the performance of your environmental management system or performance of your energy management system. So you can cut down your energy, right? Of course, you can cut down your energy. Then 10%, 15%, or 2 to 3% you can cut down. So then you can develop mechanisms. Sometimes you need to get investment from the management, they might go for a new technology or new machinery. So this is there are plenty of example. Any organization who go for ISO 14,000 or 50,000, there are plenty of stories, like maybe getting people involvement or maybe highlighting legal gaps and then correct all the legal requirements, or maybe getting additional benefit, carbon footprint, maybe your energy cut down, or maybe you identify the schedule waste, or maybe your customer requirement. Sometimes, some organization, they might have an issue with the customer requirement, but with this program, they identify, this is my customer requirement, these are the action plan, and this is how I'm going to control this requirement. And then there are best practice, like, sometimes like, the waste management part. First thing, like, you identify how to cut down, that one particular example, this any industry, when they use some chemicals, so there will be some chemical residues, like, some portion will be there, right? And then when you hand over that chemicals, because sometimes some chemicals are like, high, like, environmental impacts are there. So there should be a separate washing process for that. But then the organization, first thing they try to identify the alternative chemicals, or maybe like, they identify the mechanism to take all the chemicals, or maybe without going for small cans, they try to go for a big can. So you cut down the like residual level remaining in the can, right? So there are some organization, they like, they go beyond, like, most of the packaging materials are plastic. So there are organization, they like, they discuss with the suppliers, and then they try to use this reuse this plastic material. Or some, there are organization, they have a supplier agreement, they are going for a different material, like, cardboard material, bit high cardboard material. So they try to eliminate all the plastic. So there are lot of stories, lot of journeys with the organization, but they are not, they cannot do by themselves alone, right? So most of the time they need to have a good partner, maybe your suppliers, or maybe your stakeholders, or like, maybe your peers, right? So, oh, and same time, like, this environmental impact, like, any industries, even if it is a competitor industries, normally we don't give our, like, benefits, like, the method we are normally don't share with other industries. But this environmental sustainable mechanism, like, when you identify some mechanism, so then you tend to share with your other industries, because like, it's, we talk about the global environment impact, right? Like, if there's environmental impact, everybody will suffer, right? So you can't like survive by yourself only, right? So then overcoming challenges in aligning with the global standard. Common challenges faced by the organization, cost resistant to change, solution for overcoming these challenges, important leadership commitment to drive changes. So this is very important part. So what are the challenges we are facing right now? So when you go for this ISO 14000, maybe environment, energy, this standard, first challenge would be getting the correct data. So that's where we stuck sometimes. Sometimes like, we don't have proper data. So getting data is a biggest challenge. Say, I'll take one example. Sometimes you bring diesel into barrels. So you put diesel into generator or whatever the mechanism you're using. And then like you don't know exact amount, because like, per month you are bringing certain amount of barrels. So there will be leftovers end of the month. And like, then again you try to bring another set of barrel. So that correct data is very important, like, correct data up to the raw information. That is very important, right? So the data collection, data gathering, like, electricity. Sometimes like, when you go for this environmental management system or carbon footprint, the study, we know, like, uh, getting correct data is very important. And then sometimes like, the commuting, the transportation kilometers, or the type of vehicle. So the main challenge we are facing right now at the beginning is, is about getting data. So when you started with this kind of a program, right, this is the first challenge you are facing, right? And then second thing, when you do the legal requirement, say for example, the program will give a, like, kind of outline, say, okay, look, uh, you have increased your production capacity, you extend the capacity of the production, but your effluent treatment plant as like, early, like, maybe 20 years old effluent treatment plant, which doesn't have the capacity right now, is run on a, like, final phase. So you have to invest on that. So maybe convincing the management, because like, when you effluent treatment plant, it's a lot of money. You're not getting direct benefit out of it, but imagine the risk factors, right? If there's a violation, there will be a huge risk. So we saw a lot of industries, they have this scenario. They expand the capacity, but without considering the discharge part. So that will be like another challenge, like, investment cost part. If it is like, production related, or maybe like, productivity improvement related investment is very easy, because like, you can justify straight away, you can justify, like if I install this particular machinery, our return of investment ROI will be like within 3 to 5 years. And then like your carbon footprint cut down will be this, so that will be additional benefit. So you can do that part very easy. But whereas like, the effluent treatment plant, like you're not getting any direct benefit out of it. So then, but of course there's a risk factor. So then if you have to invest on that, there will be a serious scenario. So you need to convince. So that's why, like, top management should align with these strategies. That's very important part, right? So then like, solution, like, these are the key solutions. So, don't try to do this environmental management system, energy management system alone with the middle level management team. So this communication should go to top management, and then top management started to involve, and then there should be a strategic part has to be coming. So then it's very easy. And then that's why, like, leadership commitment is very important for this scenario. Like, if some might say, okay, I need to replace my the fossil fuel boiler with the biomass. Yeah, agreed. So then there will be a huge investment. Yeah. So then return of investment. So those areas. So there are challenges, like, one is about I inform these two factors, and then there will be a third one, the people. See, you can have a fantastic system, but if your team is not competent enough to run the operation with this high tech equipment, that will be challenge. And if people doesn't believe this, so I took a single example, like when you started to implement the ISO 14001 management system, first thing, go to the garbage and check the garbage bins. You might have names, food waste, like, metal, whatever. If everything is in place, food, under food waste only food is there, under metal is there, under polythene is there, then fantastic. The moment you see the mixed waste, like, people don't buy this. So the third challenge, I'm basically, with our experience, is about the people. So the cost, the people, like those will be like, and then cost can be two things. One is like, productivity improvement, profit oriented base is easy to communicate, easy to get the approval. But there are areas which 100% legal binding, there will be high risk factors. If you violate, maybe organization can blacklisted, organization can be stopped by the authorities. But then again, there's a decision from top management. So getting that uh, clearance from top management is very important. So if you have a sustainable leadership, you don't need to worry about that. So that's why we started this journey, started this discussion from the sustainable journey, right? Then practical step for business to align with 14,001. So these are like kind of a practical step, how to get started with 14,001 and get global standard, the role of certification in improving credibility and market access, and engaging with external consultant and auditors. So, right. Okay. So as I mentioned at the beginning, when you want to go for ISO 14,001 2015 standard, you have to define your boundary. So you need to understand, like, uh, so there's a big difference with the quality and all. Like, say, when you try to go for a quality management system, you might consider, say, okay, look, I don't need my entire organization. I only need, like, even though the entire organization is within that particular promises, you might say, okay, I only need uh, my particular department. That of course you can do. That of course you can do, right? You can say, okay, my particular department can be there. So you can limit your scope, say, okay, this particular department only I can go for ISO 14,000. But when you go for ISO 14,000 and 9,000, when you go for ISO 14,000, you can't say that. So if that particular premises, if you have two, three, the operation line, different production, but if you have one EPL, you need to consider entire thing, right? So that's first thing. So you need to define your scope as per your physical boundary. And then you have to make sure you are covering all the legal requirements. So that's the major requirement. So you study your environmental protection license, and then you study the Central Environmental Authority guideline, and as per your requirement, like there will be some subscribed by for your industry. So you make sure you are legally you are covering all the requirement, and then as per your guidelines, you are monitoring all this requirement. Then study the trend. So that's second thing, legal requirement. And then third one, you do aspect impact evaluation as per location. So your location activity. So then when you do the aspect impact evaluation, uh, your routine activity, maybe non-routine activities, and the emergencies. I'll take one example. If it is a printing factory, your routine activity will be like, printing activities are routine. So maybe non-routine would be like, maintenance of the machine. And then emergency, maybe fire, maybe flood, those can be part of emergency. So you do under each and every location, what are the routine activity, what are the non-routine activity, what are the emergency, you conduct aspect impact evaluation. That's the key part. And then you identify what are the significance. Then significant uses. So it can be environmental, like, air pollution, water pollution, land pollution, depend on that, right? So then you try to develop mitigation action plan. So one side, you identify the legal requirement, you cover all the legal requirement, then you started to monitor legal requirement continuously. And then you conduct the aspect impact evaluation as per the locations. And then you identify the significant environmental impact areas, then you develop action plan, you call it project plan or whatever, to reduce this. So this is part of continuous improvement. So these are like, and then these are like, basic structures set, and then you study from your aspect impact evaluation, you get the emergency plan. You study the emergency plan as well. So, and then maybe you can do one or two emergency drills as per the required, right? And then you can do like, internal audit management review. So then that your implementation plan part is completed, right? So you can have a team, you can do the training program, you can develop JDs, and then you can update your JDs as per the significant energy users, environmental users, you can update. So when you set up all these requirements, you can say, okay, my organization is now ready for ISO 14000 2015. Then, of course, you need to talk to the certification body. So there are certification bodies in Sri Lanka. They have approved accredited certification bodies. So what they can do is they will come and then they do two audits. One, they call it adequacy audit, and the other one is called certification audit. So at the adequacy audit, what they do is they check whether your organization is meeting the minimum legal requirement. So once you go through the adequacy audit, you know what are the critical areas you need to find out. So then they will give a guideline and say, okay, look, I need these areas, critical areas we need to cover. So they basically give you a timeline. And then once you cover all the adequacy audit requirement, then the auditors will come, the qualified auditors will come, and then they will conduct the thorough audit covering all the 14,000 2015 standard requirement. And then if you are comply with all the requirement, so if you're not complying, there will be categories like, critical, and then minor and observation. So if there's a critical finding, so critical finding can be like, legal violation, or you're not adhering into the system. So those are the like, kind of a critical finding. So they're not issuing a certificate. So they give a time again you to rectify, right? And if you have minor instances, you can have any number of minor instances. Minor instances mean not total system collapse, but they can escalate. So you have to take corrective action, but you have actually 1 year's time to do that. So then they will come back and do the audit. So they will if you go through the audit and if you comply with all the mandatory requirement of the standard, then the auditor will say, okay, look, you're good, and then we can recommend you for the certification. Then they will send the reports, everything to the assessors, then they can issue a certificate. So this process will take about like, the first audit and the second audit, depend on the organization readiness. But like once you get the recommendation from the auditors, it can take, vary on the certification body, it can take to like, 2 to 6 weeks. So then they will issue a certificate. That certificate valid for 3 years. But of course, every year they will come and do the audit. So maybe this process you can hire a consultant like us, or maybe you can do it by yourself if you are familiar with the standards. So these are the practical step aligned with the 14,000. So if you cover the 14,000 requirement, it covers a lot of areas. So which top management should involve, like, context parts of top management should involve. So they study all the risk factors. So all these requirements are basically they covered, right? Now, I think like I basically covered most of the requirement. And if you have any question, This is the time to discuss all this question.
Hi, Rasta. This is Tilina. And
Yeah, Dilna.
as you correctly said, the implementation or execution is any standard is the key challenge, especially in the current context and the factor of people. It's really difficult to start from scratch. So, what is your guidance or what is your advice? Let's say now we are going with ISO 14001 standard at the first time. So, where do you want to start first, and how do we basically based on your expectation and your experience, how do we start this?
Okay, thanks, Dilna. That's very important. See, if it is a new organization and first time when you go for ISO 14001, first thing you need to identify the good team, right? Team comprise of this is a kind of a team game. So team comprise of people who passionate about environment. Like you select that team, and then they can't be too busy, and then you select the team from like every level. So this will be a kind of a cross-functional team. You start with the top management, you have a senior management, and then you have operator level. Like everybody is like part of this team. So then when you form a team, first thing you have a good training program, like induction program, training program like uh, like for this entire team. Then they understand their tasks you need to do, and then you can do is like in our consultancy job, what we do is then we do a gap study. So this gap study pretty much focusing on your legal requirement, and then with our experience the significant energy users. So that part we do. Yeah, we do that part. So you basically like try to cover, uh, like bring a good team, then do a gap study with maybe with the team. I'm like, if we are going to do with the team, best thing, there should be a person who thorough about the legal requirement, because you try to make sure cover all the legal requirement, and then you develop action plan with the timeline, and then you develop like then you form a department teams to do the aspect impact evaluation. So then that will be the easiest way. Otherwise, if you try to do it by yourself, it will take years. So better to train the team, and through the team you can do that. But same time, parallelly study the legal requirement, because sometimes if there's a legal gap, if you identify when you do this, it might involve with the cost involvement. So that's the kind of like kind of an open area we are having a problem. Yeah, that's till I believe I give a answer to you, right? The difficult
Yeah, yeah,
areas.
thank you. Thank you, Basudha.
So any other question, team?
Uh, can we get ISO certification for a product from the company?
Priyankara, no,
Hi.
you can't get a product certificate. There are standard called ISO 1464. That is for the life cycle assessment. So this is ISO 14,000 is a process, like your organization. So whatever the product you manufacture, it's included there, but this is not a product certificate. So like there are product certificate, like in Sri Lanka we have SLS mark, and then Europe we have CE mark. So those are product certificate. And then even ISO 14, like 67, that is life cycle assessment. So that you can go for a product, but not for 14,001. Priyanka, I hope it's clear to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So any other question, team? I hope all good. So since we had this
So, Rasta,
yeah,
sorry, last question.
sure.
So
Yes.
now I have seen the new standard comes with the ESG, right? Environmental, social, and we call ESG. Is it linked with ISO 40001 and the sustainability standard? So is that the new new concept on this environment protection?
Tilak, there's this sustainability, all these these are kind of a new concept. So ISO 14,000 standard is a bit old standard, it evolved, but ISO 14,000 2004 was the previous version. Then it upgraded to ISO 14,001 2015 version. Now we are using the 15 version, but this sustainability are it's a kind of a new versions. There are a lot of new requirement. There are sustainability goals, all are kind of a new requirement. But if you cover the 14,000, 50,000, I took one example. So you can cover most of the requirement. That's easy, because the sustainable goals are, it's particularly you focus on one particular area. But these are kind of a management system. So if you implement a good management system, then you can bring on all the sustainability goals under management system. It's very easy because you have a kind of a good foundation. But if you straight away started to focus only on the sustainability goal without proper management system, there's a chance after sometimes it can collapse. But when you set a management system, right, it can hold on that. Like say for example, now ISO 14,000 is about management system. You do internal audit. Say if somebody started to monitor the carbon footprint for annual report, so that's it. That function is work as a kind of an idle function. But if you do 14,000 and then bring carbon footprint under their project, like the KPIs kind of a thing, so then it automatically goes through the internal audit process. There will be people who responsible for that team will be there, and then every year there will be a target. So it's very smooth operation. Yep, that's what I think.
Thank you.
So can we have the recording of this session?
I think we can share that. I think I'm not sure whether Kishan has recorded this. Kishan, have you recorded this?
Yes, it's recording, sir.
All right. Okay. So we can you can talk to Pushpika. So we can provide the recording for the only for the participant. You can do that, right?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, we can do that, Priyanka. We can do that.
Thank you, sir. So thank you for this session, and it's very helpful to get insights about these ISO certifications. Can you arrange like a physical workshop or something in future? That might be, I think that's very helpful to us in this field, in the environmental side.
Yeah, that's we are planning to do. Hopefully, we will be starting from next year onwards. Next 2 months, we'll be focusing on some other tasks. But of course, we are planning to start the physical training programs from next year onwards. So we will keep you in update on that, Priyanka. Thank you for the feedback.
Thank you, sir.
Right, look like there's no question. So we can wind up, and you can connect with us on these two numbers. So I think I'm on this number. I'm on WhatsApp. So if you have any concern, if you, any questions, anything, I think best option is put a WhatsApp because most of my time will be on training or discussion, talking to somebody. So but anyway, I'll look my WhatsApp very frequently. So better to use this number if there's any feedback or anything. We will take on that point. So thank you very much for participation. And then Kishan, you want to wind it up?
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Asita, for the informative and valuable presentation. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope this session has provided you with useful insights into ISO 14001 and how it can support your environmental management goals. If you have further questions or need additional resources, don't hesitate to reach out. Once again, thank you for your participation. We'll look forward to seeing you in our future sessions. Have a great day. Thank you.